Every single day, people take unwanted or unused items to thrift and antique stores across the country. But as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and we're here to prove it. Identify valuable things before you throw them away. Join us as we show and tell of treasures found and sold by a full-time reseller with the hopes of helping you find some treasures of your own. Welcome to the What's Sold podcast.
Welcome back to the What's Sold podcast. I am Brandon. This is Matt. He is the merchant of madness, the aftermarket machete. He is the
slashing prices, people. Slashing prices.
Sunday,
not with a
everything.
scalpel. This is not precision work. It's not guesswork either, but it's like, it'll get the job done, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, today's show is interesting, Matt. It is a show about regret. My wife asked me today, she's like, I had worked one time years ago at a school that I really, really loved. It was like my kind of first job out of college. I just loved it. I was there for maybe, 10, 15 years. It was just a great family place. And,
awesome.
And I left because I wanted to do something different. And she goes, do you ever regret leaving there? Because I had run into a friend who still works there. And he's been there for, I don't even know now, 35 years, whatever. Mm-hmm. A long time. Teachers are apt to stay at a place forever and ever. And she asked me, she's like, do you regret leaving there? And I said, I don't regret it. I certainly could have seen staying forever, but I try not to regret the past too much because everything I've done, I wouldn't be doing this show with you. I said it wouldn't be, I wouldn't be creating podcasts. I wouldn't be doing all the things that I'm doing. So regret is a funny thing, but we are going to be talking about regret today. Wait, first, before we get into the sort of the main bulk of it all, Matt.
Okay.
Do you have any regrets in your life? Things that you're like, oh man,
nope.
I wish I would have just not sold that that Buffalo nickel when I was 10, or taken a different job.
Regrets of things I wish I'd held on to when I was younger. I mean, knowing what I know now, absolutely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of primarily toys, and also wish I had. Certain types of sports cards. I do still have a lot of toys from my childhood, which I think I saved kind of thinking that maybe my kids would play with them. And they do a little bit, but I mean, they're not new and shiny. They're old. So they don't care, but I've got a bunch of old Transformers and G.I. Joes and He-Man and Ninja Turtles, and I've still got a lot of their weapons, and that stuff's cool. I look at it and I don't remember specific days or times playing with it, but I remember I played with them a lot, and I wish I had, and even when I was younger, I remember having some older sports cars and things that were in decent condition. Had I held on to them till now and had them graded, they could be worth quite a bunch.
Yeah, so, it's funny. I've mentioned this before in the past that I had this ginormous comic book collection. I mean, thousands of covers. And, I just like collecting them. Frankly, and this is what I think all collectors probably really are at their heart, I just enjoyed comic books. I just really loved them as a kid growing up. I loved the X-Men and all the different things that were out there.
Yeah.
So, I would collect them, and then they got more and more and more expensive. I don't even know what they are now, but when I first started collecting, they were probably, I think 50 cents a cover was that I remember I could buy 5 books or 6 books for $3. So I was like, every month I would hoard my nickels and pennies, and I would go and get my 6 covers that I really loved for $3 at the local.
Out of curiosity, what were the titles or the types that you were most interested in?
Well, I loved, my all-time favorite is the X-Men, for sure.
Okay.
It was such a weirdly, anybody that's a comic book aficionado or I don't know if anybody out there listens or whatever. I'm sure there are some people that try to sell them or what, but it was truly a cutting edge comic book. It was sort of the first comic book that had sort of real stories in it. It was like real people who were struggling with real things, as opposed to like, hello, I am Captain America here to save the day. It's like Wonder Dog. I mean, that kind of comic book was really popular in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But by the time you hit the 70s, the climate of the country had changed a lot. So books like the X-Men, which came out, I think, in the late 60s, maybe the early 70s. By the time the X-Men came out, it was sort of indicative of the way the world was. So anybody here that remembers, I was a little bit young to remember excuse me, much of the 70s, certainly none of the 60s, but I do know that it was a much more complicated time for a lot of people. So that was reflective
This is
in comic books.
the Gerald Ford era, like
Yeah, kind of probably in
post
there.
Kennedy and
No, post Nixon, really. I mean,
post Nixon. So Reagan, like not quite Reagan.
No,
but,
not quite Reagan. I mean, I started collecting probably in the late 70s during the Carter administration and then all through the Reagan administration.
Not that comic books have anything to do with U.S. presidents.
No, nothing.
Maybe they should make a U.S. president comic book.
I'm sure they have. I guarantee
sure
you they have. And this was, by the way, this was also comics that were prior to computers. So if you look at comic books now, they're most of them are generated, computer generated art. So it's really, you can see the distinctive difference. When you look back at stuff prior to like the 90s, comic books looked very different. It was all hand drawn.
Oh man, underground comics, especially like from the 70s, like in Chicago and stuff. The art, it's very crude is not fair to say, but it's not as clean. It's not as, a lot of times it's just black and white, right?
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and there's something very pure in that. You know,
absolutely.
We're not here to talk about comic books on this show, but I did love, anyway, we were talking about regrets. I had all these, and I had lugged these boxes around with me forever. And I'd gotten into my early 30s and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give them to somebody who has kids. And I remember I gave them to my buddy and he had 2 little boys. I said, hey, whatever happened to comic? They are literally strewn across the attic. I had backed them and put them in plastic. Yeah.
Creases.
It's my one regret. I kind of wish I would have hung on to now because I would have turned them over to you and we would have made a fortune.
Old wet Cheerios stuck to the covers and things.
Yeah. Coffee stains or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we could all probably look and wax poetically about, if I just had that Captain America #1 still, or whatever it was that you...
I mean, if I think about it, there are things, but do I ever actually think about it other than being asked this question? No, it's not. I don't live my life being like, beating myself. I got enough to beat myself up. I mean, I'm a very fallible person, so I don't need to look very far back to feel like
to find the big mistakes.
That's right.
Well, it's funny you mentioned something about nostalgia with your kids, and there's books that we read as kids, and you read them now, and you're like, wah, wah. Kids are like, what? So
not only that, have you ever read it like as an adult? Any of the older, and so by old, I'm talking 80s and before, but really back in like the 60s or earlier. Not exactly nursery rhymes, but kids' stories, almost like fate, like Grimm's.
We have the books of them.
Grimm, those things. I mean, all these ones that you know about now are like that you teach your kids now. A lot of these very known stories. I'm trying to think of some examples of stories, just like, I don't know, Cinderella or Little Red Riding Hood or some of these things. You read them back in the 50s and 60s, and they are all super dark.
Oh, yeah.
Someone is being not just killed, but like tortured, eaten. It's just very graphic and you clearly see like a very distinct cultural idea of men's and women's and children's roles, which do not necessarily match up with today's culture. But a while back, I got one of these older things. I was like, I'm going to sit down and read these to my kids. And I started reading one, and I'm reading it, and I look over, and my wife's just kind of looking at me like, are we really doing this right now? Maybe we need to dial it back a bit.
Kids, your daughter's gently weeping.
They're asking lots of questions after. I'm like, did it really this? And I'm like, no, it didn't really happen. This is a made-up story.
A lot of those are German stories, too. And the Germans had I think, in the time when a lot of those fables were written, it was a very dark time.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
it was like Grimm's
So beware.
fairy tales.
If you're going to if you want to just introduce your kids to the rough side of the world and history early on, then feel free. But otherwise, you maybe get the Disney adaptation.
Yeah,
from
maybe
2000s.
do a little pre-reading. Maybe go back and look at what you read. And, I've mentioned this before, but you read some of that stuff from like the 50s and 40s, and it's very, they'll be like, the colored man. You're like, whoa.
Sure.
What?
Well, and you think about what was going on then, obviously, racially, and also the war was happening. It was either happening or it was just over. And so we don't have to get into all that. But all that to say, there's things I would change younger to hold on to. But what we're really wanting to talk about, I think, are like...
We're going to talk about Thank you for the segue. That was a
No
great
problem.
segue, Matt. Very professional of you, by the way.
Thanks so
to
much.
take us off our.
You know what? It's just some people have to work to be professional. I have to work to be laid back.
Yeah,
This is
I've
how
always
I
said that
roll.
about you. I've said that about you. It's like, hey, just chill out a little bit. Well, today we're going to talk about regret, but we're going to talk about things that you've purchased as in your, even in the 20 years you've done this, something that you bought. We've often talked about things that we regret not buying. We're going to talk about things today that we regret actually buying, so that when you're out there as a reseller or an aftermarket merchant, as like we like to call them, you're going to, I don't know where, you're going to the bargain basement, you're going to the thrift store, you're going to the whatever, the swap. You see something, you go, ooh, I really want, that's going to make me a lot of money. You buy it and you regret it. So we're going to talk about that today, along with the things that we sold this week. So
yeah, and I got
you bought
I got
that
a
you regret,
surprise.
Matt?
I've got a surprise as well at the end. So we'll do this, like you
Oh.
said, we'll discuss a few things that sold, and then I'm going to talk about a thing that is sort of new to me that I'm finding has quite a bit of value. So I'm going to introduce that in case there are people who also don't know about it, so they can keep a lookout for it. I'd like to start doing that a little bit more often. One thing here or there, just to kind of introduce things. And some people will be like, oh yeah, like I already know that. But if you're new to it, maybe you don't. So that might help.
Right.
So I will say, so just disclaimer before I get into this is that a lot of the stories I'm going to tell, I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy things like this necessarily, but just hear the story. And if you can glean some sort of information that will help you make a smart decision if you encounter these types of things or these situations, then you can hopefully learn from my mistakes or my regrets and then not have to do that yourself. I would say that one thing that I regret sort of earlier on, well, going back a long time ago, I've been selling on eBay since either 2000 was the first thing I ever bought or sold. And I've had an account that I've done just very little. There have been periods where I've done very, very little at all, and others that a little bit more of a standard part-time thing. But for the longest time, I would either buy things just for me, cheaper, right? I was like a typical consumer who was just trying to find something that was it was in decent condition, but wasn't brand new. But I got into buying and selling instruments really probably around 13 to 15 years ago because I enjoy music. It's a hobby of mine. I can play a few things. And so I would buy them. And this was not big scale, people. This was like, if I could find a guitar for $100, and I'm like, that thing is worth $175. I'd buy it and I would list it and then I would play on it and I would learn about that brand or that model. And then I'd sell it and make $50. And at that time, $50 was fine. Like that was not too little or too much. And then I would take that $150 that I have now and I'd reinvest that in another thing. Now I buy I can buy up to a $150 guitar that's maybe worth $250, right? And then you just keep doing that. So there are a few that I regret buying back then because I was not real well versed in that world. I didn't know how to research things super well. And so there were times when I bought things and ended up selling them for roughly what I paid. And that still happens today, but I kind of know going into it that that's a possibility, or I intentionally sell it quickly to get the money back, knowing full well that I could let it sit longer and make more. That's just a calculation I have to do daily, if not weekly, in my job. So there were some of those because I didn't really make any money. I just sort of wasted time. Now, you could say that getting to play on it and use it for a little while was the benefit there. And if that's all it was, it's fine. But that was when I was just doing it. I wasn't really trying to make a living at it. But early on, I would say, I started this full time in 2020, whenever we had, when the big health crisis hit. And at that time, this was before Goodwill, which everyone probably has heard of Goodwills. They're a national thrift store company. They used to put all their jewelry out on a wall, hanging on with tags or in cases and things. And so you could go in there to almost anyone and find jewelry. And even today, somewhere around 30 to 40% of my sales are from jewelry or things very close to jewelry. So I would buy a lot of things, and I discovered by watching lots of YouTube channels about resellers and what they were buying, about this type of early plastic that was used in a lot of jewelry called Bakelite. And we've talked about it on here before. You may or may not know what it is. If you're not familiar with it, it would just look like any other type of plastic, most likely. But the more you see it and the more you buy it, you get used to the types of jewelry that they made, the styles that were made at that time, and the colors. And so even today, I'm not 100% perfect. I don't think anybody is, but I can usually hold two or three things and compare them. And I'm usually right if I say, I think if any of these are Bakelite, this is going to be the one. And so then if I test it with, it's called semi-chrome polish. You can buy it in it's almost like a little tube that you could get, glue in or something. And you just swab it on there, rub it a little bit, and it changes color, and then But when I started doing that, I would find them for
Can I ask you why would you need to test it? What does it matter? Just because Bakelite was an attractive, people want it?
Well, so there were a lot of different types of early plastics. There were lucite, and there's Bakelite, and as industry made advancements, they found things that were more durable, maybe cheaper to produce, easier to work with, this and that. Bakelite has ammonia in it. And so if you don't have semi-chrome polish, one thing you can do is just sort of rub it with your thumb a little bit to warm it up and then smell it. If it smells like ammonia, it's probably Bakelite. Now, there is a collector base for Bakelite in jewelry. They also made lots of other things, by the way. They made handles of silverware. They made children's products, even like little
radios.
Definitely radios, poker chips, dice. There's all kinds of things that they made out of Bakelite. And it can be like translucent, semi-translucent, or opaque. It can have swirly colors in it, or it can be plain. But there's a lot of Bakelite was made out of this like yellowish orange color, green, reds, blacks, and browns. And they're usually solid colors. Sometimes you can find bangles that have like little spots, like little polka dots and things like that. Those typically sell for more just because they're more unusual and not as many of them. All that to say,
I feel like Bakelite's sturdier than modern plastic. Am I wrong? It feels always heavy duty to me whenever I feel Bakelite.
I don't know. Actually, I think that it depends on how it was stored and kept, but I definitely encountered kinds that have been somewhat brittle. So it may depend on the color, like maybe certain dyes made it more likely to break down over time. They will sometimes kind of fog over on the outside, and you kind of have to rub on them to get them back to the original color. But I would buy these and I would sell them. And at that time, right around the time I became a reseller, a lot of people became resellers. There was a gigantic surge in the reselling market. There was a gigantic surge in the buying and selling of trading cards, like sports cards and Pokemon and those kinds of things. And what naturally happens when a bunch of people get into a particular industry, you've got not only a large number of competition now, but you also have a bunch of people learning about your items, your niche. And so you've got competition and a bunch of more knowledgeable people. So around that time, a couple of things happened. Number one, Goodwill sort of wised up to the fact that, hey, eBay's making a lot of money on this stuff online, for example, and we're just selling them for like $1 or $2, and we know people are finding valuable stuff. Gold, silver, Bakelite, other things that are like antiques, right? So not overnight, but in a short amount of time, they completely changed part of their sales model. And now, and this is not 100% because I have heard that there are still some Goodwills out there that will have jewelry, but by and large, jewelry when it comes in is just shipped off to another site or other locations where they do metal testing. They do testing on gemstones. They look up stuff to see if it's antique or collectible, and then they sell it on an online. It's called shopgoodwill.com. So they have their own form sort of eBay, and something that's really valuable, like a 2-carat diamond ring set in platinum, those will be set at a price, and you either buy it at the price or not. But 95+% of their things are on auction, and they just auction them off. And you would be surprised. I see stuff on there selling all the time for 2, 3, 4 times what they would sell for on eBay. I mean, they are making way more money than they did, and even more money than a lot of their competitors. So that happened. So I was not able to source that anymore unless I found it in a lot of things that I bought from somebody individually or at an antique store, and they didn't know what it was or the price was good enough. So I couldn't get it well enough. Also, I think a result of all the people coming in, learning about it, going to buy it, the market for that stuff dropped way down. There's more people who know about it, more people collecting, and maybe not many more people collecting, but more people buying it, and there's a surge of availability. Now the rarity of what's available to be sold drops way down. So this was a long story to tell you that during that time in 2000, 2001, and even into 2020, 2021, 2022, I bought a bunch of this stuff, and I set it up as buy it nows. And then after a year or so after that, the market dropped significantly. So now I still have a bunch of Bakelite jewelry sitting around that, used to I might be able to get 70 or 80 bucks for it. I'm lucky if I can get 20, 25 because the market has dropped that much. So I regret having got all that stuff. But to be fair, I didn't know the market was going to change.
I was going to say, how would you know?
I wouldn't. But I think this is a cautionary tale to people. Excuse me. I think this is a cautionary tale to people out there who look for certain things when the market is hot. Do not expect that the market is going to stay hot forever. It is a fluid thing. It changes, and different things happening socially, culturally, or politically, or whatever can affect sales markets in specific categories. So I guess I would say if you get something, don't wait around forever. Don't expect that you're going to get that high price forever. Maybe pay attention and try to get that thing sold within 3 months, 6 months, because you at least are more sure at that point, provided you did your research and bought it at a good price, you're more likely to be able to get that price if you sell it quickly. Because if you wait, now it could go both ways, right? It could go up too.
Yeah.
You can't know.
Is there any sources of information, you talked about research, that might help a reseller out there to kind of determine what's hot and what's not, or what's growing and what's, you know what I mean? Similar to the stock market.
When you research things online, if you research just on Google, like let's say you're using Google Lens to find out what something is, or maybe where it's being sold, you're going to see usually things like auctions. You're going to get stuff from WorthPoint and invaluable.com, and some of these, they're just kind of ridiculous. You try to click on that and look at it and you can see the picture, but they won't let you see what it's sold for unless you pay some sort of subscription fee to their website. So you're like, okay, I struck out there. You keep looking, and then you're going to probably see some active listings on places like Etsy or eBay or comparable sites like that, maybe even in other countries. You can maybe look and see what they're asking, but then I go to eBay and I look at sold listings. I will look up that specific thing in eBay. Once I've pulled up all the things that are actively listed, I'll look at sold items, and then I'll want to see how many are currently available. Let's say there's 6,000 of this item available currently to be sold. And then you look at what's sold, you're going to see how many sold in the last 90 days. If 4,000 have sold in the last 90 days, then that's like a 60, 70%, something like that sell-through rate, which is fantastic. That means there's a strong buying market for that type of item, and that you have whatever that is, 60 to 70% chance of selling yours within 90 days if you put it up at the average price. So that tells me, and I'll tell you right now, if I go into a pawn shop or something like that, and I have something that I want to sell, do you know what they're doing on the computer right behind there, like that I can't see? I've seen it before because I've been enough places and seen to the side. They're looking it up on eBay. These places, yeah, that's how they research it. So eBay is actually a pretty strong indicator. Again, it's the highest resale market that is out there for any one site. They have the largest market still. And so they want to see what's it selling for right now. So I would just encourage people to look that way. That has suited me pretty well. If it's a very valuable item or an antique thing that's maybe rare, there aren't a lot of them, or collectible, you may have to take some other steps. You may have to research further. You may need to contact a local auction house. You may even contact a large auction house or find museums that through research online have things in their collection. And then you could send them photos and say, like, is this what I think it is? Would you, I'm not asking you to sign your name on a thing, but could I have any idea of the best place that I should try to sell this at, or a value? And they, depending on who they are, they may or may not share that. But yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I once interviewed a art historian. She actually has this really great online presence, and she talks about the history of art, but I was like, man, if you had a source like that, a person that you could actually talk to who, maybe you said, listen, if you can help me with this, I'll give you 10% of the sale or whatever. It seems like that'd be a really good source to have as a seller.
It is. It can be. You may run into issues with a person like that who feels like that offering that or saying that ends up being like a conflict of interest in some way with their job. So provided that's not an issue, or maybe they can do it sort of like off the record, individually or something like, hey, if you ever say this, like I'll deny,
Right.
But knowing someone personally who is an expert in a particular field, or who collects certain types of things and will pay good money for certain types of things, that's super valuable if you're a reseller, especially because sometimes you get things you don't know what they are. Oh, the other thing I've mentioned before that I'll mention again is for all kinds of collectible items out there most likely is some sort of a Facebook group of people who are all on a particular group on Facebook who are just sharing information, helping people out who are inquiring about a particular thing, buying and selling or trading those things. So I've had really good luck if I get a hold of something that either I don't know what it is or I know what it is, but I'm having a difficult time determining value. I will get on I'll ask to join. I'll join the group, and then I'll make a post with pictures and I'll say like, hey, I'm just looking for information, or I'll say, hey, I'm interested in selling this. If you're interested at all to communicate about it, send me a private message. I've sold things that way, and I've also obtained a lot of really valuable information. So that's another thing. So eBay is good. Facebook groups are good for
what about
more
Reddit?
Specific. I've never really used Reddit for this specific thing. I usually use Reddit when I have a question about something or I'm wanting to buy something, like a review, not old things, but like newer things. And I want to get people who have actually interacted with the thing's impressions or thoughts. And I'll go and I'll read a thread on people's opinions. To me, it's more like these are opinions. Whereas if I go to a group who specializes or buys things, they can say, this is what the market is doing right now because I buy in this market right now. And they can say, this one sold on eBay 2 months ago for this amount. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. They can show you that. And that's really what you're wanting. But you might be able to use Reddit for something like inquiring about market trends, which we're talking about. What do we think the outlook is on mid-century modern furniture over the next 5 to 10 years? Because it's super hot right now. Should I jump into that? Usually it's about 100 years after something's produced, there tends to be a spike in societal cultural interest that has to do with clothing, furniture, style, a lot. So in 20s into 1930s was sort of, and even a little bit later than that was, you had the Art Deco period, you had the Art Nouveau period in the 20s and into the 30s, and then you started getting into others. And those are still popular. But since it's 2025, in 5 years, we're going to hit a new decade. So what was popular in the 30s? It's likely that we're going to have some kind of also spikes in things that were valuable or interesting to children in a particular decade. I'm in my 40s now, and in the last 5 years, really since I was in my late 30s, early 40s, there's been a spike in the resurgence of reissuing the same types of toys I played with when I was a kid that I mentioned earlier. Because they know that the demographic who is at the age that have kids of those ages now is my demographic. So they come out with all these toys because they know I'm going to have an emotional reaction when I see that. It's going to be, I'm going to feel very nostalgic for that. And I'm going to want, if it was a good experience, which most of the time kids playing with toys is, they're going to want their own children to have that experience and go buy it. So if you know certain trends or certain things that tend to happen like that year after year, or decade after decade, you can kind of get ahead of that. But I could use that as like hey, do you think that this is going to stick around? Is this just a flash in the pan? Should I invest in some of these things, or will the market drop? I'm not saying you'll get accurate information, but you'll at least get opinions from other people that you don't know.
Yeah. All right. So you regret buying so much dang Bakelite, boxes and boxes of it. Any other regrets that you have in terms of things you bought that you're like, well, sound like a great idea at the time?
Yeah, and I spent way too much time on that particular set of stories.
No, I think that was great information.
I think so. A couple other things. There's one big one, and I'm going to leave that to the last story, but I bought a large vase that was a glass vase maybe 2 years ago. And it was an L.E. Smith vase, which tend to be pretty collectible. If you look that up, L.E. Smith on eBay, and you'll see a ton of these things. Glass. And I only paid $50 for it, and it was like a $250, $300 vase. But the deal is it was about 2.5 feet tall. So it was a very unusual size. And obviously because it's made out of glass, it's super breakable. So the thing I learned from this experience, well, let me first finish the story. I cut myself off. I did sell it relatively quickly for a good amount of money. It was about $255. I packaged it up. I shipped it FedEx. Yep, I'm calling you out, FedEx. And that when I saw the picture, it was just heartbreaking. Shattered in like a million pieces.
Handled by the FedEx gorillas. They hired gorillas to do all their...
Yeah, pretty sure they ran over it a couple times and then took it up on a 10-story building and dropped it off for good measure. And I had to refund all that money. So not only did I lose the $255 that I earned from that sale, I lost the $50 I spent too. So, I was going to make $200. I lost that profit and my investment. What I learned from that...
the regret was the fact that you purchased something that you probably shouldn't have in terms of the shippability.
The regret... So again, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying don't ever buy vases. I'm not saying don't buy things made of glass or porcelain or ceramics. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, what I learned from this is, if I'm going to buy something like that I know is super breakable, if you add the element of size to that as well, it makes it all the more risky. So, and also, I try to not ship through FedEx anymore because I've had too many, I've shipped with them maybe 2% of the time and 98% of the time through the U.S. Postal Service. But the amount of times I've had packages damaged from that 2% is like way more than I've ever had damage from the U.S. Postal Service, regardless of size or breakability or weight.
Wonder why that is.
And I think what part of what it is that I've heard that a large amount of their processing of packages once they've been scanned in is automated through conveyor belt systems and machines. So if it's heavy and large, that thing may drop off from a height of a few feet. And if it's the first one in the bin, it's just hitting the hard surface, It's possible that the workers are not real gentle also, but I have no way of knowing that, and so I'm not even going to suggest that, but I suppose it's a possibility. So now when I buy things that are made of breakable things, I want them to be as small as possible because I can pack more stuff around it and it still stays a smaller package. And I can put more, things around it. Now, if I find a big jug that, was made by a particular artist or something that could be worth $2,000 and here it is for $150, I'm probably going to bite on that because, I can take extra steps. I could require them to come pick it up from me. I could drive it to them, depending. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that was something I learned is that there's a certain monetary threshold, and it's not all that high where I'm just gonna pass on it. Yeah, I probably could make money on it, and it's a 50-50 chance that it'll get there intact. But I don't want to take that risk now.
Yeah,
at this stage. So that's one. Another one I regret is I really like paper ephemera products, and actually a few things that I sold that we'll talk about today are paper ephemera. But when I was kind of getting into it, I just sort of kept getting bigger and bigger. I was like, oh, well, why buy one thing when I can buy a lot of 10? Why buy a lot of 10 when I can buy a lot of 75? Why buy 75 when I can buy a tote of 50 pounds of mixed antique paper ephemera?
Oh, of course.
And so I did that I bought 3 or 4 tubs, probably 250 pounds worth of antique, various pieces of paper ephemera. What am I talking about? It could be postcards. It could be photographs. It could be catalogs. It could be pamphlets. It could be old calling cards, coupons, tickets, trade cards, marriage licenses. It could be any kind of government document. It could be old bonds, anything you can think of that's paper, that's made out of paper, something like that. So the regret I have with that isn't that I didn't find some cool, valuable things, because I did, but it was the amount of time that it took to sort through it,
to individually
individually package it, the time it takes to photograph that stuff and measure it, because people want to know the size, the amount of loss. So anybody who buys out storage units or antique stores or things like that knows, or you buy an estate. I don't know, everyone has their own calculation, but it could be as high as 50% or more that you know of the items that you're buying will straight up go into the trash. Like they will have no value at all. Either they're damaged to where no one will buy them, they're destroyed in some way, they are missing pieces or components, they need to be repaired, you can't do it, you don't have the parts. There's all kinds of things. It's out of style, it's stained, it's whatever. It smells bad, it's books that have mold in them, which, you don't want to put even one book with mold in it in your library, because you could potentially infect other books. So that was the same thing with this paper ephemera. Out of a tub of 50 pounds, I may have had up to 40 pounds of stuff that was so damaged that, now, this is my own fault, because when you buy a lot like that, you're taking a risk, right? They're not showing you every single thing. They're saying, this is a mix of stuff that might have some damage, and then you're like, well, actually, it was a whole lot. But, it's shame on me, because I took that risk. It was a risk I knew going into it. So I still love paper ephemera, but I'm not going to take that risk as much anymore because of how much loss I have and how much time it takes to go through all of that. So I want to be more choosy on that. I'm not washing my hands with that category. I'm just less likely. I'm more likely to buy a lot of 200 pounds of costume jewelry that I haven't seen all of than I am paper ephemera. Because even costume jewelry, I can sell broken and damaged stuff in lots to people who do crafting and stuff like that. So even the worst stuff still can have a little bit of value, whereas the worst stuff in the paper, it just needs to be in the trash.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last one here, and this is a little bit of a story. I'll try to speed it up.
No, you can take your time.
I bought out
we got nothing but time, Matt. Nothing but time.
So I bought, a couple of years ago, I bought the contents out of an antique store that was going out of business. I won't get into all the details, but basically what had happened was I saw a listing on Facebook Marketplace for actually kind of one of those storage buildings, like an aluminum building, and it had a bunch of boxes and different things in there that, antique stuff, vintage items. And they wanted $5,000. Let's see. Yeah, they wanted $5,000 for all of it. And that's a lot of money, but it also looks like a lot of stuff, and I can't tell what's there. So I make an appointment. It's about a 45-minute drive from my house. I go in, and I'm looking around, and, it's not the greatest stuff, but it definitely has value. It certainly has more than $5,000 worth of value. I could probably double my money there, right? Spend 5, make 5. So I look at it, and I think, okay, I can get this in just one truckload, so I'd need to rent a U-Haul or something like that. They said that they would box a lot of stuff up that wasn't boxed, and that they would even have people on site to help me load it when I got there. So I thought, great, I don't have to pay for any extra work. They're going to help me. While I'm there looking around, and I essentially agree to buy it, the lady says, oh, and by the way, up here, like this building you passed, was my antique store. This is the good stuff, and I'm going out of business. And I just need $3,000 out of that stuff because I got to get out of here pretty quick. And I go, okay, well, let me look at that too. I go in, and it's a lot nicer stuff, but none of it is packaged. There's a lot of furniture. There's a lot of large, heavy items. There's a lot of stuff, but I mean, that one's an even better deal. I'm like, $3,000 for this could be like 15 to, I may be able to pay $8,000 and get 20 back in. It'll take time, but it's what I do. This is my job. So I bite. Okay, I buy all this stuff.
Oh, I got a bad feeling.
Peaches came down, and that guy, sweetheart, he helped me for a couple of days. He helped me load stuff. I had a person who actually lived in my area who had found my YouTube channel, and I had ended up meeting him personally, and he offered to come and help me load some stuff just to be a nice guy. They did box up a bunch of stuff. They did have people there, but because of the extra things, it was 2 20-foot U-Haul trucks that I needed to move all this stuff. I had to do it over 2 different days. So 2 days. One day I loaded up a 20-foot U-Haul truck with only one other person to help me unload it. And it took all day. We were exhausted. We loaded it all. We drove all the way back to about 5 miles from my house and unloaded it. We went back the next day, same thing, loaded up another 20-foot truck, came back, unloaded it. So what I didn't tell you was in the couple of weeks leading up to me actually going and paying and picking it up, I realized I needed a bunch of storage space that I didn't have. So I thought, oh, no problem. I'm just going to contact a couple of storage storage facilities and get some storage units. No. Guess what I found out? Even though, I don't know, there's got to be like 50 or more storage facilities within about a 20-minute drive radius from my house, not a single one of them had available storage units. Not a single one. Every one of them put me on a wait list. And now I'm sweating it because I verbally committed. I haven't paid the money yet, but I verbally committed to buy this. And I'm like, I've got to get some storage. I have to get something. Not only did I have to call 20 or 30 places and put my name on there, but for days I had to make a call again every day. Hey, did anybody back out? Hey, I'm still interested. Hey, can you do it? I eventually was able to get some, and because the ones available were not big ones, they're like, oh yeah, the big ones, the 10 by 20s, the 14 by, whatever. Those people hold on to those for a long time. Oh, great. So people will call me, I've got a 5 by 7, or I've got an 8 by 12, and that's all I could do. So instead of getting 1 or 2 big storage units, I had to have 7. So at 2 different facilities. Now they happen to be in the same town, luckily, but you can imagine when I'm unloading a large truck, you unload a quarter of it. Okay, that one's filled up. Lock it up. I had to buy locks for all of them. Drive around the corner, open that one, undo it. Yeah, so it was a lot of work, right? I didn't really think through all of that. I knew it was going to be work, but I didn't fully know it until I got there. So we buy it all. I pay $8,000. Now I have 8 different storage units that I have to make monthly payments on until the items are out of there and I can close them. So we're talking anywhere from like $75 to $200 a month per one. All of a sudden now I've paid $8,000, but now I'm like $500 or $600 a month monthly payment that I have to pay just to store this stuff. You want to know how long it takes to, as one person, to pull out, photograph, list, and pack up all of the trash and all of the stuff that's not worth selling that's in there that I mentioned before? You know how long? I don't really know. It's a long time. So over the next few months, I'm paying on storage. I'm targeting one. I'm trying to get as much out of one and finagle and move things around in others so that when I get down to a small enough level, I can pull the rest of that stuff out in just my pickup truck, take it to another one, put it in, so now I can get rid of this one storage unit. Okay. So hopefully everyone now is like, oh, good, he makes horrible mistakes too. And this wasn't even the first year. This was like 2 or 3 years. I'm like, hey, I got some extra money. Yeah, I can buy large lots of things.
Oh
I
my
can
gosh.
do this.
I'm just visiting a gas can right now.
Yeah. Not to mention, how much gas is that? How much did it cost me to rent the U-Haul trucks? Right? That was a cost, and you have to pay the cents per mile on top of that. So for months, I'm downsizing. Okay, it's down 7 to 6. Okay, 6 to 5, 5 to 4. I get it down to 2 storage units with a combination of selling things online. Also, the other thing that I didn't really factor in was how much of the items were too large to ship. I can't ship freight. So I have furniture, desks, sewing machines, old fans, old bed frames, racks, like all of these things, big artwork that I can only sell locally. And getting into heavily trying to sell on Facebook Marketplace, I was like banging my head against the wall because for every single item you want to sell, you're going to get somebody who's trying to scam you. You're going to get somebody who wants to pay you $2 for a $200 item. You're going to have people who commit to going to buy it and don't show up. All of those crappy things that you can encounter in this type of work. So I get down to 2 units, and then I get the idea. Actually, I was talking with someone at a antique store that I had a small little glass case of jewelry and small items in that I paid a monthly at an antique store just to have another local place to sell at. They had a big room opening up. It was like a 14 by 20 room. And I was like, I want that. Because my thought is I would rather pay them rent to have my stuff in there because at least stuff's selling. The idea is enough stuff sells to cover my rent, and then I make some money. It's better than just paying to have it stored and getting nothing out of it.
Right.
Plus, all I have to do is the work up front. I have to price it, put it in there, I'm done. If I get depleted, I just put more things in. So that's what I do. I move out of those units. I'm out of the units now, but that was over a year, maybe a year and a half. And so then I get in there. Now comes possibly the saddest part of the story. Well, all of that's sad. Then we had this little thing called Hurricane Helene come in in
Oh my
October
gosh.
or September 27th of this last year and completely washed that building away. With it, all of my items probably had 18 grand of inventory in there of value, like not what I paid for it, right? I paid 8 grand
Right.
originally. I'd probably made 4 or 5, 6 of that back. Maybe I'd made the whole 8. I actually stopped counting because I have so many other things I bought from different places. So then I lost it all. End of story.
So in
what
the
I've
end,
learned,
you just lost money off of that.
I
and
don't.
just a
I
lot of
don't think I
time.
lost money. I don't think I lost money. I actually think I made all the money back from what I paid for the items, and through the money I earned month to month for another year or so of having stuff at that antique store, I made enough to make back the extra expenses that I had for that. I can't make up how much is my time worth
Right.
over those year and a half or 2 years. So that's a learning experience. I'm not saying that I'm not saying it's not good to buy out antique stores, not that it's a problem to buy out storage units that are going on assignment, but there's a risk there when you buy bulk things that you don't know what's in there, because a lot of it's going to be loss. You need to factor in, do you have a place to store it? How much does that place cost? Do you have a box truck? If not, how much is it going to cost to rent one? Are they available on the dates that you need them to be available? Do you have other people to help you work? Is it all on you? How long do you think it's going to take to sell that stuff? How much can you sell online? How much do you have to sell locally? If you can't sell it locally, what do? Do you just trash it? That's also a gas, in your vehicle to take it to dump it. And if you go to a transfer station or the dump, you got to pay to dump it. So there are a lot of things to think about. I'm just going to be a lot choosier now. And even since then, I want to say I've done large buyouts. I've bought whole rooms full of stuff. I've bought gigantic lots of things from estate sales. So I'm still doing it, but it's much more calculated now. And I want to know approximate amount of what it's going to cost me just to get the deal done, the cost of it, the cost of transporting it, the cost of storing it. And I need to be pretty confident that I can sell the majority of that stuff within 6 months.
I could tell you right now that Helen in Duluth and Todd in Albuquerque are both, there's just tears streaming down their face that story is just almost crippling when you think about all the work that had to have gone into that and everything you did. All right. We are going to talk about what we sold this week. So we're going to segue into that. Folks, just buckle up. This is just going to be a longer show than normal, but we want to show this stuff.
Yep.
That is a great story. That is gold, Matt. That's what we call in the podcast business. That's podcast gold right there, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what did you sell this week?
I'm going to go quickly because we don't have a lot of time. So one thing I sold was this kind of vintage.
Ooh.
It's a gravy boat. So it's connected. It's got a bottom part that's almost like a oval saucer. And then it was made together. But it's like a blue sort of floral print with, like a little bird on the side. It sold for $4.99. It was made in Japan. It was made as a Japanese export probably in the 1950s. And I just want to show that and talk about it and say, this is ugly. Not a whole lot of people are going to want this on their table right now. This is the kind of thing that you can still find for $3 to $5 at thrift stores, Goodwills, but there is value in it. So even research stuff that you, from time to time, just say, you know what, I'm almost certain this is worth nothing, but I'm going to spend 15 seconds to look it up anyways, because you might surprise yourself. Another thing I sold, some paper ephemera. This is a dedication day program for the First Presbyterian Church of Hillsboro, Ohio, Reverend William McSurley.
Oh, sure.
Okay? And this was from May 14th, 1899. So it's very old. It has the sermons and the prayers and the whole service, kind of everything that happened in the service. This sold for $20. So this is the kind of thing you could buy in a lot of antique paper ephemera. And if you have 200 things that are like this, 200 times 20, like that could be some good money. You don't know. But I've made, one thing I'll say about paper ephemera is it's good. You can store a lot of it in a small amount of space, but it's the type of items that are not going to sell overnight. It's going to be the kind of stuff that sort of underpins the other exciting, expensive things you sell. It's what will keep your business going, is those smaller items. So it's nice to have a combination of things. Another paper ephemera item is like the cover. It's a cover of an old scrapbook from Victorian era. It's got a couple of children and a center picture that was actually it's a trade card that was stuck on there, like glued on there. And this has just since deteriorated and ripped off. But inside, or on the other side, I have 7 different pages that came from this originally, and they all have different types of die cuts and trade cards from the Victorian era of like women, fashion, children, other types of things like that. And this one, it sold for $38. If it had been intact, it could have sold for quite a bit more than that. And people, by the way, sell these trade cards by themselves, if they've never been used. Some people buy these scrapbooks and either use like a hair dryer or something to heat up the glue and remove them, or they'll just tear them out and sell them individually. You can find thousands and thousands of old trade cards for sale, and certain types of certain images sell more than others. So that's all I'm going to show you. One other thing, paper ephemera, is this paper sold yesterday. It is a newspaper. It is from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Nevada's largest and most complete newspaper. This is from December 7th, 1973. It's volume 65, number 248. But the main headline on here says, Gerald Ford sworn in as U.S. Vice President. So that's what this is about. There are certain types of newspapers that can have quite a bit of value if they're talking about major events in the United States. Now, the downside is major events were likely covered by almost every newspaper in the country.
Right.
How many were made by the New York Times? Like probably a lot. But how many were made by a tiny little newspaper that's not even in existence anymore? Well, that might have some value, right? If we're talking about the moon landing or Kennedy's assassination or something like that. So keep an eye out. This kind of stuff, I mean, I'm selling this on consignment for somebody, and I have 3 tubs of hundreds of newspapers. And she was like, I almost hate to ask you to try these. I would just assume throw them out. But if there's any value, put them out there. This sold for $25. It's just one newspaper. I've got hundreds of different major events in the United States from probably the 90s all the way up until the 80s. Yeah. So again, nothing super exciting, but these things do sell. People do collect old newspapers and old programs from churches that you've never heard of.
And they keep your business going.
They do keep my business going.
We talked about that, and I'll kind of sign off with this, but I've been doing a lot of research on different YouTube resellers because I'm fascinated, and we're in that sort of we're in that space big time.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. Like you and I have talked about this, Matt, with these people like, oh, I went to the Goodwill and I found this item and I sold it for $40,000. It's like, no, man, most resellers are not selling these items they're selling them for 25, 20. That's what keeps you in business. That's what makes you the side hustle.
That's exactly right.
That's the reality of what it is.
So I'm going to actually lied. Because we've taken so much time, I actually want to spend more time on this last item. So what I'm going to do is a teaser. Don't be mad at me. The teaser is I'm going to talk briefly and show the images of a couple items. And on the next episode, I will show them and talk about them again and tell you about them. We're doing a cliffhanger. So the first one is this little plaque. It's actually set up. It's framed, like it can go on the wall. And it is an image of what appears to be coral and little, almost like little water bubbles or something in the background. It's a black background, red coral with little white bubbles, and it's framed. Okay? And this is a different size and shape, but these are the same thing, just in a different form. These are too small. They almost are the size of like a medium-sized cameo. They're oval. Yeah. And on the inside, they have depictions of flowers, very colorful, and they are inlaid into, again, this black background. And they feel just kind of like plastic, maybe slightly heavier than plastic. These happen to be highly valuable and very old. So anybody who's watching the YouTube video and sees these, leave a comment if you think you know what it is. Otherwise, I will show and discuss these and give you more information about them. This is something I just recently learned about and am selling. The plaque is mine. I got recently and didn't know what it was until these other items came in on consignment. I've done research and wow, you need to know about them.
You're killing me, dude, because I know you're not going to tell me. So, well, there's our cliffhanger, folks. Remember, write that comment. Tell us what you think. I have no idea what it is, so I'd be curious to see if people put it in there. We definitely check the YouTube channel. Remember to follow, like, and subscribe all our different spots. Give us information about what you want to talk about, questions you have. Go to the subreddit, all that stuff. But otherwise, that is all the time we have today. I'm not even going to ask for Matt to give us his
Don't do the things I did that I regret. Don't do them.
And that's his last word.
That's it.
Anyway, we'll see you guys with a brand new show next week and a new cliffhanger. So have a great week, everybody.
Take care.